Welcome to Soul Night Live, episode number 105. Today, our guest is Doug Helvering of the Daily Doug. Hey, Doug.
Hello.
Thanks a
Awesome.
million for taking time out of your afternoon to come by and chat about your show on my show.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I've been doing this for, I guess, about a year and a half now. Thanks to COVID, it was kind of a way to kill some time. And, you know, out of that grew this big interview show where I got a chance to chat with a lot of my favorites. And
Cool.
it's been great, I mean, it's funny how you make lemonade out of lemons, and I think that's just the spirit everybody should have when they face adversity.
That's kind of how my show came about as well.
Well,
So
I'd had a
it's kind
feeling.
of, yeah, it kind of outgrew out of, by the time that kind of COVID really hit, it was, what do I do now sort of thing. And it took a while, and I've been having a lot of fun doing this little show for since January. I've been doing
Okay.
mine, and yeah, it's going really, really great, and meeting a lot of wonderful people, and it's been quite a ride so far.
Yeah. Now it's the Daily Doug. Now that is that 5 days a week that you do this? I figure you got to take a couple of
Yeah,
days off on the weekend,
for
right?
sure. So the Daily Doug is my vlog, and the what we've kind of come up with. We do a video 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. On Mondays, we've kind of branded that as Metal Mondays. We do some heavier music on those days. Yeah,
That's right.
and and on Fridays is when I'm trying to typically get into longer listens. Um, Not necessarily full albums, but longer pieces, and then we kind of have a potpourri of stuff in the middle. And uh, on my Patreon, which is like a subscription service, I do a couple of other videos a month that are specifically for that community. And we've been doing some behind the score, some analysis stuff. We That's where some of the longer listens can live. Like just this week, I posted a reaction to "Fragile" by Yes, the entire album,
Oh, nice.
which won a poll in our community for that album to be listened to. So that sort of stuff. But it's been quite a ride so far, and I think we're just getting started. So it's going to be quite a I think quite a fun space to explore over the next few years.
Well, good. It's good to hear that you're planning to keep going. I think I am too. I'm actually kind of taking a break. I've done over 100 shows and I got a little burnout, but
Yeah,
I'm kind of peppering them in there every 3 weeks or so. I wound up at the new job recently where I'm the manager of a music store, so I had to kind of
nice.
stop what I was doing and go wrap my head around that. And now that I have, I'm kind of working the show back into my schedule. And yeah, I've really enjoyed your show. I'm a little skeptical about some of these reaction videos, but you
Mm,
being a musician and being able to kind of give us more than just, oh wow, this is amazing. You actually
yeah.
take the time to tell us how these pieces are put together, and
Mm.
not too long-winded or too wild. I imagine that's part of your Patreon where you go a little deeper into the theoretical nuts and bolts. Am I right?
For sure. In our behind the score series, those are done with scores, and you almost have to be a little bit of a trained musician to get a lot out of those. But there are a lot of people on the channel that have requested that sort of stuff. I made a living uh, talking about music in real time to people. I mean, as a college professor of mainly musicianship, I just was used to doing it with classical pieces, and you just find a knack for doing it. I taught at the college level for over a decade, and when I started doing this vlog, it was like COVID. It was just something positive to do with my day.
Sure.
And my brother was telling me, you gotta do reaction videos, and I was the same way. I was like, I really am not a fan as a genre of reaction videos, other than just the interesting thrill of being able to experience somebody else experience something for the first time that I won't ever be able to get back. I mean, that is a unique little fun element about these reactions.
Sure.
But I never got anything musical out of the music reactions either, for the most part. And then my brother said, well, you're a teacher, tell them how it works, tell them why it works. And on an initial listen, there's some of the basic nuts and bolts that I can get into, just as I'm hearing it in real time. And that seems to be just the right amount to let people that aren't as well versed on all the the technical jargon,
Yeah, the
still get
theoretical
something out.
aspects.
Yeah, that they can get something out of it, but the people that know what I'm talking about can also say, "Oh yeah, that's cool. He's pointing that out," or something like that. And it kind of is unique to my skill set.
Yeah.
And it's kind of fun that I'm able to just be myself on the channel, and I'm learning a lot of new repertoire. For me, this has been a time where I didn't really take a lot of time in the past to listen to heavy metal, to prog metal and older progressive tunes. Because I was really busy trying to prep my own classes, write my own stuff, and I was primarily in the classical field. So there's a lot of repertoire there too that we have to know, and
Sure.
you spend a lot of time just with different pieces. And so I thought, well, now is a great time. It's weird because the people I'm talking to mainly know the repertoire better than I do, but I have a sort of a skill that can help interpret it and almost do like play by play, in real time, and deepen the appreciation for these tunes.
Yeah. Well, I was wondering how, you managed to avoid this music your whole life, or did you
Mm.
grow up in a household where rock and roll was kind of forbidden, or were you
It,
just
no,
all, everybody was into classical and that was really all they liked?
Interestingly enough, my family, it wasn't that any music was forbidden or anything. We just didn't listen to a lot of it.
Okay.
We were a sports family. It's my brother and me. My dad was a semi-professional sports baller before he retired, and then I played like every sport I could get to, and so did my brother. And we just never really. I mean, we listened to what was on the radio in between home and school,
Right.
or school and practice, and that was normally top 40 radio, or even country stuff back in the day, because we lived in the South. And so I didn't have much vocabulary for much of popular music. And then when I got into studying music and doing it as an outlet, when I was in high school and then into college, I gravitated towards listening to classical stuff. And so all of the like the old school Genesis and like King Crimson and some of these bands that were just in the generation before me, I never took the time to go back and listen to that stuff.
Sure.
So now is that opportunity, and it's a unique one, to be able to document the journey, and people are having a good time, I think, participating.
Oh, sure. Well, that's kind of what drew me to your show was, for starters, the stuff you're talking about. If you were sitting there
Mm.
dissecting a Madonna song every week, I probably wouldn't watch. But you're talking about, and nothing wrong with Madonna, but, I just, you're talking about some music that I grew up that I love.
Mm.
And, I want to talk about these songs anyway, and often do. So,
What's your favorite band that I've done on the channel?
well, it's tough for me to just pick one, but I suppose in a short answer, yes. A real short
Mm.
answer, 3 letters. Yeah. I suppose I've been a fan of them since the early 80s. First concert I saw.
I've been really, really fascinated by them. There's nobody that I've heard play the bass like Chris Squire, and there's nobody that I've heard sing like John Anderson.
No,
And
no.
then when you throw in Rick and Bill and
Steve.
Steve, yeah,
Yeah.
who plays a guitar like Steve Howe? Nobody that I've heard, and it
No.
takes me a while to start realizing just how special it is, because I don't have much context.
Sure.
So I've done. I think a lot of people found me on my Close to the Edge video. It's done very well, and it's been out for 4 or 5 months now.
Mm-hmm.
But that's as close to emotionally sort of getting really caught up in what I was listening to as any that I've done, and I've done over 200 episodes of this vlog series. Normally, when I'm in a mode of trying to figure out what's going on, it's critical listening mode and not listening for emotional pleasure.
Right.
And so it's not often that it's something when I'm in that mode that something really breaks through emotionally for me. And that culmination in Close to the Edge just bowled me over.
Oh, I can imagine. And I think
unbelievable.
There's a good dose of classical influence in their music. I'm sure you hear it, and
for sure.
So it's almost like if anybody was going to say, "Hey, Doug, check out some rock music," I think this would be the rock music to go to first. With your background.
If you're going to talk about interesting chord progressions and voicings and modulations, you need repertoire that does those sorts of things.
Sure, right.
Right. It's got one of my early bands that, actually the first one that my brother, suggested that I do was Iron Maiden.
Right.
And he picked them because the music is very cool. But also the fans of Iron Maiden are very loyal and they will support the band.
Sure.
Whenever they see people doing stuff. So I went on with some Iron Maiden stuff. I'm like, oh, it's in this key. And there's that chord, and there's that chord. Oh, that was kind of nice. And people are like, "You're saying it's nice, and you're a classical composer? We like you."
Sure.
When I started doing the reaction videos, it was in late January, and I had less than 200 subscribers on my channel.
Oh wow!
And I did an Iron Maiden. I think it was Fear of the Dark was the first one that I did, and I went back a few days later. At that point, I was just doing a couple a week just to do them. And I went back a few days later and looked and saw, wow, there's like 5,000 people that have watched this.
Yeah.
How is that? I think I should do another one.
Right.
So and it kind of snowballed from there.
I was going to say, I mean, what advice would you give to somebody that just started a YouTube channel and wants to get viewers?
It's just like going fishing. You got to keep putting videos out.
Right.
That's the hard bit of it. When I tell like my uncle, who's like, "You do what now?"
Right.
as a part-time job, I told him I'm going fishing. I get up every morning and I read in and I record a reaction. I then edit it and I put it out, and then I go and do other work.
Okay.
And sometimes you catch a big fish, and sometimes there's nothing biting, and you never know what the copyright gods are going to do that day, and if something can be monetized or not. But all the work has to be put in,
right?
Ahead of time. So that would be my biggest thing is come back the next day and keep generating content.
So consistency is the key.
Consistency helps more than anything. Once people caught on, oh, he does metal songs on Monday, I should look for his stuff on Mondays.
Sure.
It starts to build some recognition and some branding, and like I say, a reliance or a consistency that a consumer, if I'm seeking to build a consumer base, give them something to identify with, and that's consistency and of quality and of just being there.
Sure. And so how has YouTube treated you? Have you run across any where they just took it down and wouldn't even let you show it? And if so, why?
Well, gosh, that's a long conversation.
Okay, well, the short version.
I've learned a lot about how copyright works on YouTube just by observing how the machine runs. And it's weird. I think it's fundamentally unfair, and it's a fascinating accomplishment by YouTube programmers to be able to do this. So I have had maybe a half dozen, maybe more of stuff on YouTube that has got just a flat out block worldwide, and Even if I appeal it, it just they block it.
Is it
Um,
certain groups that seem more proactive in that department than others?
there are some that are notorious. I just did an Ozzy Osbourne tune on Monday that
Oh
got
yeah.
blocked worldwide.
What song was
Uh,
that?
it was Diary of a Madman.
Oh wow. Well, that's got a classical Leo Brower right in the middle of it. So
Yeah,
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 that's a good
and
one for you to check out.
I actually didn't even know that one. Somebody had suggested that one just for the quality of the guitar of
Oh
Randy
yeah.
Rhoads playing
One
more
of
than
his greatest
anything,
moments. Yeah, absolutely.
for sure. And so I have a Vimeo site now, so I put it up over there and let the YouTubers know. But yeah, Black Sabbath tunes don't get blocked, but Ozzy Osbourne tunes do.
Interesting. Well, you
You
know
know,
who he's married to. She's on top of things.
Sharon knows her stuff.
Yeah, she's
The, so YouTube is a weird mechanism. It's all user driven, and I'm a content creator the same as Ozzy Osbourne is in the eyes of YouTube. And what they do is they allow their users that create content to then pre-flag their material and say, hey, if you see this material being used in somebody else's video, I want you to automatically either block it or just take the monetization
sure.
or or let it go. So all of that stuff is predetermined. And when I'm uploading a video, it processes it, uploads it, and then it processes it. It takes a little bit of time.
Sure.
And during the processing, almost every single time I get a copyright claim.
Right.
Most of the time um, it's bands that are saying, we see that you've used our song, you can put it out on YouTube publicly, but all the monetization belongs to us.
Right.
I can dispute that for fair use or for educational purposes or whatever, but the disputes go back to the copyright holders that filed the claim in the first place.
Exactly. And it isn't always the people that are in the band that are doing that. I have a
It's
good
normally, yeah, it's normally their publishing company.
right. I mean, it's kind of funny, but I had Derek Schulman and his son Noah on, when they did the freehand
Right.
reissue from Gentle Giant. And, we watched one of the videos as Noah told us how he put it together. And of course, it got flagged right away. And it's like, but wait, I'm sitting here chatting with the guy that's singing on this, and he's cool
Yeah.
with it. But that's not enough. It's whoever,
It's really strange. And the thing that bugs me the most about it is that YouTube stays completely out of it as an entity. They, on behalf of the publishing organization, issues the copyright claim the way that they have instructed YouTube to do it. And then I can appeal it, but it just goes right back to the people. And 90% of the time, or like almost every single time, they go, yes, we would like to keep your money. Yes, thank you.
yeah, the half a penny you're making on each view, we're
the
keeping.
way that I'm able to make a little bit is if I respond back, if I dispute a claim, and that dispute never goes answered, because that has to be answered by an actual human.
Okay.
Right? They
Sure.
give you 30 days. If that goes unanswered, then it kind of reverts back to me. And
Oh,
so
I
I've got a few that are like late bites that, and over time that builds up enough that it's enough to sustain a little bit. But yeah, YouTube's where the people are, but the copyright stuff is really, really either underregulated or backwardsly regulated, in my opinion.
I have to agree. And and I don't really play songs on my show often at all, but once in a while an artist will say, hey, and then they play it and it's like, oops, should I cut that out later or just leave it alone? Whatever. It's not like I'm rolling in the bucks, but every little bit helps.
Sure.
Though money was never a motivation to do this. It's just a nice kind of byproduct once you get the ball rolling,
Yeah. And I never knew that this type of money could even be made, even in the amount that I make off of doing this. That's where the Patreon really helps, that subscription base.
Sure.
there is provides like a baseline of stuff that allows creators like me to be a little more like, I don't have to do bands that I'm pretty sure are going to block me because they're so huge, or but I also know that they're going to be the ones to drive in the most number of views.
True.
You know,
Yeah.
today I went to a band like Big Big Train and just
Yeah.
really enjoyed their stuff as
Yeah.
well. And
Great modern prog band. Yeah.
sure,
Yeah. Who says prog
you
died
know,
in 1980? It didn't, but some,
it migrated,
yeah, it
and I
kind
think
of went
there's
underground for a while, but then it
well,
came
there's
back really
some.
big in the 90s.
I think so. I mean, there was that like more like that metal, that prog metal. I
Sure.
think came first, and then sort of that more melodic stuff, more based on like old school Genesis and King Crimson and Yes,
Sure. That
in
kind
some
of
of these newer bands.
those 90s bands that grew up on that stuff and went, hey, we want to make music like this too. We want to make our
For
own,
sure.
but this is, what inspired us. And there's a
Yeah.
whole wave of 90s prog that's kind of like, that. It's like, I have your record collection too, fellas. We all grew
Hmm.
up with these records. I could hear them in the
And
grooves.
the hard thing with what's been going on for me is that in the prog genre especially, I don't know what I don't know. So my with my Patreon, we have a dedicated little Discord, which is like a little subreddit that
Hmm.
where we can all kind of talk back and forth to each other. And the folks over there have been really helpful with, okay, this person in this band, that person. Well, he also plays bass in this band. And
Right.
then that drummer is in that. And I'm like, oh, okay,
Oh,
it's just
yeah.
like classical musicians where, you know, um, I know like 40 or 50 choral vocalists that make up, a lot of different professional choirs around the country. They just travel from one to the other because they're
Okay.
the best at what they do.
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
at the top, it's a very
Oh,
small community.
yeah. Well,
And
yeah.
it seems like it's the same in Prague.
Yeah, well, it's like the roots of that family tree really intertwine in interesting ways, and
For sure.
it's really cool.
I mean,
So
I found that with like I was somebody suggested to me doing a song by a band called The Nice, and I'm like, I don't know who
sure,
they are, and they're like,
right,
well, it's Keith Emerson from ELP, his
sure,
other band, or his.
right,
I'm like,
yeah,
okay, you have my
yeah,
attention now,
yeah. And again,
you know,
that's another one that's very classically inspired. I
for
hear a
sure.
lot of classical inspiration in most of these groups. They're British. They grew up listening to classical music in a way that a lot of us Americans didn't. And you hear it, like you listen to Genesis, Tony Banks, and he's a right out of the romantic era
For
influence.
sure.
Meanwhile, Keith Emerson's more into the more modern guys,
Hmm.
that came along, 100 years later or so. And you could just kind of hear it in his chord voicings and choices. How he loves chordal harmony and fourths and all that kind of stuff, which is a kind of an edgy sound compared to the more romantic stuff.
Yeah, but it's also really interesting. Right around that time, the early '70s, is when the classical folks kind of turn their back on young artists, on emerging artists, and
Mm,
say, you know what, we've had it with these composers that are writing stuff that is almost unplayable
right.
because if you follow the real classical route or that stream through the mid 20th century, the music gets more and more chaotic, it gets less and less melodic, it gets less and less tonal and more difficult to listen to. And so if you want to go back and like listen to a symphony that was written for the concert stage celebrating its 50th anniversary, written in 1971, you're not going to find very many because all those guys went to joining prog bands who would have been composers, or they went to write movie scores in Hollywood.
Sure.
And then the orchestras are like, well, we're fine to keep playing Beethoven and Brahms
Right.
because people know that stuff. And it's weird. It's like that sort of symphonic style concert music, except for a few that break through, especially with minimalism in the '70s. Um, it's the Prague is where these guys go,
Yeah.
and it's a lot of fun to hear Keith Emerson try to basically imitate an entire orchestra on an organ. It's amazing.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of it's about, and prog rock is like this too. It's kind of like, the whole name is prog, progression, as in we aren't going to repeat things. We're going to keep growing and covering new ground. But you reach a point where, the new ground is atonal and it's microtonal and all these weird things that most people would not find very appealing to listen to. And it's like, yeah, you're doing something nobody ever did before, but it's hard to swallow. So it's almost like there's kind of a limit that you reach when it comes to, how far you can push the envelope and still keep an audience. Although there are,
Yeah.
there's strains of prog rock that are very pungent harmonically that, make Yes sound like Madonna, just kidding. But you know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, I looked at Tarkus by ELP a few months ago, and I was looking. I'm like, okay, this sounds exactly like Hindemith as a classical composer, because Hindemith treated fourths in some of his compositions as consonances, and then wrote like Mozart, or tried to. Just treating what we would normally consider a dissonance, a consonance. And Keith Emerson was basing his entire composition on a fourth, that interval being the resting interval instead of halfway between a third and a fifth, and having to resolve one way or the other. And it gives it a really unique sound.
It's kind of edgy, It's kind of
but it doesn't take very long for you to kind of sit in with it and go, okay, this is the sonic palette that we're working from, because he's consistent in his technical approach and the tools that he's using.
Sure.
But in our 12-tone system, we figured out that dividing the octave into 12 equal tones was probably going to be the most beneficial and the closest to the way that the overtone series actually presents these tones. For like everybody to agree. It's almost like the MIDI interface. Everybody just needs to agree. This is what we're doing. And it took us probably 400, 500 years of just working through all of the permutations of how you can use those 12 different types of pitches.
Sure.
And then we got to the middle of the 20th century, and we're like, okay, what do we do now?
Shall we get?
And it was kind of.
It's like, shall we stick a note between all 12 of them and have 24? No,
when I was in college, we used to tune on, we would do tunings on microtones. We would be able to sing like an E flat chord and then go up to an E chord and then do the one that's in the middle as well. If you start really figuring out where the quarter steps are, then a half step becomes a little more defined instead of just the smallest one.
Right. Yeah.
It's just one step further into your training.
Sure. And, and certain, cultures go all about microtonal, over in India, places like that. And even slide guitar players kind of get into it a little bit because they have the ability to get those notes, and a fretted instrument can't. So, yeah, it's an interesting world that I think has yet to be explored, but it's a little hard on the ear at first until you kind of get an ear for it.
It's really difficult to write because to write microtonal music, because you have to have an instrument that can play in the cracks.
Right. Yeah.
You can't ask a piano player to play an F half sharp.
No.
It might be an F half sharp, but it's going to be that way the entire time. String players where they can play unfretted strings are easier, right? Brass players, trombone players, that's the easiest spot where you can get into microtonal stuff because they play with the tuning slide.
Yeah, trombone and slide guitar are kind of in the same family and don't even know it.
For sure.
So tell us a bit about your musical background and the music that you write.
Well, I got into music as an underclassman, 8th grade, 9th grade. And I was asked to join my school choir. And at the time, I really didn't know anything about music. And the teacher said, well, we need boys. We need guys in the choir. I said, well, what's the ratio? He says, well, this year we've got like 30-something girls and like 5 or 6 guys. I'm like, I will be in choir.
You go. Yeah.
What time is choir? And it became the hardest thing I ever tried. matching pitch. What are these rhythms? How do I find my voice in the rest of all these? It was just a whole new world to me. I am an analytical person by trade. I was really good at math. And just the way that all of these little parts intersected just really got to me. And so I stuck with it through high school. And by the time I got to college, I wasn't a music major to start off college. I ended up switching to music in my sophomore year, when like everybody else that was in the choir was like, you can do our theory homework for us and you're not even in the class. So you need to either shut up or join the class.
Right.
So I did. And it kind of went from there. Because choral music is where I sort of got my introduction. It's where I've always sort of fit first. All my degrees are in composition and theory, but my secondary instrument is voice. And I do play some piano, but I wouldn't consider myself a pianist by any stretch of the imagination. I can comp along and play. But most of the stuff that I've written is choral music, choral and vocal music. It's what I love. It's what has gotten played, and then the stuff that gets played is what people ask you to write more of. So I've written several things over the years that have gotten pretty wide distribution, and hoping to write some more. I haven't written much lately because I've been so busy with what I've been doing, but need to get back to writing some good stuff.
Yeah. Has anybody from the prog world approached you about collaborating?
Not in a musical sense. No, I have done a few interviews and talked with a few people in bands, just like via Messenger or something, just to chat. But that might come. That would be a lot of fun. I would be up for pretty much anything. So
I think your show has set the stage for a possible prog album from you. So think about it.
That sounds like fun. I'll have to think about that.
No, I was thinking the same thing about Rick Beato. It's like the whole world knows who he is now. Let's hear a new album, Why not,
It's funny because becoming a content creator, it's different than you have to almost leave your active musical self over here and then become sort of a video producer.
Sure.
And using your skill set from your other life to do that. I love Rick's channel.
I do too. Yeah.
He really knows his stuff. People think I have a good ear. He has an absolutely great ear.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And what I do, I'm living proof that this can be learned. I really didn't have a good ear as a kid musically. And you just, by the time you actively define something that you hear for the 100th, 500th, 1000th time, you're like, oh, that's that. It's just, you just start to recognize it, but it takes intention and just time of just plugging away and doing it.
Sure. It can be done. You don't have to be born with any special aptitude. I mean, a lot of people obviously are.
And when I get asked to teach like ear training to really talented music school students, I better know what I'm doing.
Right.
Otherwise they're going to own me. So you have to sink or swim, and if you swim long enough, then you get some skills.
Sure, absolutely. You just you feel like a natural in that context once you kind of get to know it well. Do you have a little studio in your house where you could record some original music?
I don't have recording stuff. What you see is what you get here. I'm at my computer. I've got a printer and I've got my keyboard right behind me. And I've never really gotten into recording. And that's part of why I hardly ever talk about the recording, the aspects of the recording itself. I don't have as much experience with digital audio workstations and audio mixing and editing and all that sort of stuff, and recording. Whenever I've done recordings, it's when You go into a nice room and the audio engineer has a couple of microphones and they take care of it.
Right.
You know, and I'm not in a recording studio playing an instrument. I'm in a reverberant space singing with an ensemble or performing with an ensemble. Classical recording is a whole different ballgame.
Sure.
But I'm eager to learn. It's something that the last couple of years I've thought, you know, I need to know more about that if I'm going to continue to operate, because there's a lot of people that use it, and I'd love to be able to just be able to flip it on and record some stuff for sure.
Well, I think now it's easier than ever. So when you get ready to jump into the pool, I think you'll find it pretty easy.
Yeah, I have done a little bit. If you look on my channel at some of my, I have these things called meditations and improvisations. I do have a little microphone here that I've taken into the church where I work, and just played some meditative style pieces that are designed to be sort of helpful mentally for folks, and I've recorded some of those, and those are all just kind of stream of consciousness recordings, and those are on my YouTube channel as well.
All right, well, check them out, folks, and sit back and relax. Give them a listen.
I've got some original compositions there as well, pieces that I've composed that are available. I mean, that's what my channel, I've had my channel since 2009. I just used it for my own little corner of the internet as a college professor who writes some things, and it only was this past year that the Daily Doug sort of took off. But all that other stuff is still there.
Okay, well, check it out, folks, definitely, because we want to know more about the man behind the show and the music that comes with him. So that's great. Am I right? You went to University of Kansas?
Yes, that's where I did my doctorate.
Yeah, I grew up in Topeka, so I was
really
30 minutes away. Yeah.
So. I was at let's see, Washburn is over there.
Sure.
Yeah. And that's where some of the guys in Kansas, I think, went to school.
They went to Topeka West High School, which was over
there. You go
on the other side of town.
My wife and I lived in Overland Park, Kansas, and she was going to the conservatory there in Kansas City.
Oh, okay.
And then I was teaching at one of the community colleges in Kansas City while driving to Lawrence. Okay. And doing my doctoral studies. That was in the mid to late 2000s.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Great school. Underrated. I really enjoyed KU.
Yeah, I think everybody just knows their basketball team, but it's great for academics as as
Yeah. The music building is right across from the basketball arena.
Yeah.
And we actually saw a bunch of the basketball players at the cafeteria because because we were on the same side of campus.
Yeah. So what are some classical composers you would suggest to prog rock fans?
Okay. Well, it depends on the type of prog you like, I guess. I mean, if you're into stuff like the neoclassical shredders, like Steve Vai, Yngwie Malmsteen, stuff like that, you would go for like Paganini or Liszt, these really virtuoso players and composers that wrote pieces that are similar. Vivaldi, with all of its Baroque sort of stuff and just virtuosic playing, would be something to go to. If you really like funky harmonies, I've never suggested this before, but there's an antique writer, Gesualdo, Gesualdo. And he wrote some funky harmonies. This is back when we were trying to figure out where the tonal system was going to live and how it was going to live. And so you get some really interesting sort of expressionistic outbursts and harmonic twists and turns, just for sheer brilliance with putting together the musical puzzles. Bach is as good as it gets.
Sure.
Bach is Bach because he never wrote a wrong note, as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
Let's see, who else? Holst Gustav Holst, The Planets. There's a lot of modern prog that I think is built on some of that, the voicings, and that particular suite, which came out right after World War One. The musical establishment did not like it at the time. They thought it was noisy. They thought it was, but you've got a piece written about each of the planets besides Earth.
Right.
This is before Pluto was discovered. Great piece. In a similar time period, Stravinsky, the Firebird Suite,
Sure.
the Rite of Spring. There's something just guttural about the Rite of Spring, and just earthy about it, and primal with its rhythms. I've told some people who are really into Tool to look at Stravinsky for a similar rhythmic, just fun.
Yeah.
And just great stuff.
Have you noticed or caught wind that Yes's walk-on music for many, many years was the Firebird Suite?
I don't know that piece.
Oh, okay. It's more Stravinsky. And,
Okay.
it's that's kind of their signature walk-on tune,
Well, there you go. They walk on to Stravinsky.
They often do. Occasionally, they swap it out for Benjamin Britten's Young Person's Orchestra instead. Kind of like they just get a little tired of the Firebird and try to something different. So I think in '79 they went with Benjamin Britten instead. But 9 times out of 10, it's the Firebird.
Yeah.
And
who else?
Crimson.
Lenny Bernstein is another composer who I think prog fans would like. His approach to rhythm and harmony is really, really intricate and interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you going to say about King Crimson?
Oh, I was going to say, they covered Mars from Holst, early on. Like it became something, they couldn't call it that. The family wouldn't let them. So on their second album, there's a tune called The Devil's Triangle that's basically Mars. But you can find some live versions of them playing it, before they called it that, where they just call it Mars. Like the original King Crimson, the first lineup that did Schizoid Man in the first album, that was part of their live repertoire, was Mars.
I'll be darned.
Yeah.
Well, that Mars tune famously he's in the tonic key. You've got the fifth that goes down to the diminished fifth. Yeah. And there's a lot of folklore around whether that interval is inherently evil or not. I think it's a bunch of hooey as far as I'm concerned. But the sound is really compelling, and there's not a whole lot of classical pieces that take a tonic chord or the home bass and use the diminished fifth to harmonize that particular home bass.
Yeah.
It has a sense of foreboding that a lot of composers went away from. I've heard it in Genesis, I've heard it in Opeth, I've heard it in Tool, I've heard it in a bunch of these bands, and I'm like, it's immediately. There's only so many times where I can say, hey, that sounds like Mars.
Right. But it's had a big influence.
It is a big influence for sure.
King Crimson practically took that and made that the template for their harmonic vocabulary. There are so many songs in their catalog that, it's like they've taken all these dissonances and made them consonant in their world, if that makes sense, because you can take 2 notes that are rubbing really bad together and make a really catchy riff out of it. It can be done.
You definitely can. And if there's one thing that I have learned more, even since I did my doctorate, it's where that dissonance is placed and how it's contextualized, what drives the emotional context. If all you write is consonants, then there's never going to be any drama to be experienced in the music that can mirror the drama that we experience in life. And then the release of that, or how unresolved, does it ever get resolved, or how does it get resolved, that sort of thing. And where that dissonance gets placed and how it gets placed is really, I think, what differentiates the skill and creativity of our different main players these days.
I could see that. And it's interesting. You could take something like a root and a flatted fifth, and those 2 notes alone sound pretty dissonant. But you wrap other notes around them, and suddenly it kind of takes the bite away. Like, in the middle of every dominant 7th chord is that interval we were just talking about.
Sure.
But it doesn't sound so mean. It almost sounds like a blues chord once you add those other notes.
Yeah, because they're surrounded by consonant intervals, right?
Yeah.
They're surrounded by thirds, which are all either major or minor thirds, which are all constant. You can also hide it in the fifth to a minor ninth of like a minor nine chord,
Yeah.
or a dominant minor nine chord. So that interval, when it's used, it's also used a lot between the where would it be? It's in the diminished two chord of a minor key, right? So
Right.
it's there, but not often is it associated with like the main tone of a piece or the key area. And Yeah, that's just Prog's being expressionistic, right?
Yeah.
Wearing their emotions on their sleeve and saying, this is the way the world is to us, and this is what we think about it. Deal with it.
Sure. And just, these are the sounds that we gravitate towards. We like
Mm-hmm.
these intervals, And
For
yeah.
sure.
So have you delved into any jazz fusion? Because I always felt like prog fans like a lot of that stuff because it has a similar emphasis on technique, dexterity, adventurous arranging, interesting
I
harmony.
think I think the closest I've come so far is Snarky Puppy.
Okay. A
Um,
modern group that's amazing. Yeah.
yeah, they're unbelievable. I've listened to several of their stuff. I included um, Lingus on my channel. It's been about a month ago, maybe.
Yeah.
But I had known, so that's another hard thing. It's like some of these, like I mainly do reactions. I have found though that if I tell people I've already heard this one, but I wanted to include it anyway, they don't care that it's
Sure.
a lot of times that it's not necessarily a reaction. So I may start doing more of those things. There's a lot of music that I've shied away from because I know those, so they're ineligible for my channel,
Right.
and
Well,
that I'm coming back to.
I'm more interested in seeing you kind of dissect it. I don't really care if you've heard it before or not. That the whole
Mm,
shock and awe thing gets old pretty quickly. That's
yeah,
why I like your channel because you give us more than that.
cool.
Um,
Well, good. I'm glad it resonates. And like I said, I'm used to having so much music to get through in a curriculum with these students that a lot of times you'll go from just one piece to another, and I have to point out in the margins. Did you hear that? That's what we were just talking about before, and now this is what's happening here, and you're just guiding them through a listen. And that's just what I did for so many years because we had so much repertoire to get through, that if you spend a lot of time stopping and starting and being obtuse about what you're talking about and not getting straight to the point, then you'll run out of time in the amount of time that you're allotted
sure.
by the university gods. So it's just natural for me to just what I get stung for though is people say you're talking over the solos. Stop it.
Oh,
I'm like,
well,
well, that's where there's no lyrics.
right.
So
Well, I like how you kind of talk about the lyrics and try and get some meaning out of them. I think that adds an extra layer of interest. How many
yeah, I
of
mean, I
your
write I write texted music, so the lyrics are always an important element to me as to how it clues me into how they're treating the song harmonically and what sort of um, relationships we can build between the musical elements that they're making and how those might correlate to the meaning of the lyrics.
Yeah. Well, I was watching you talk about "Song for America" from Kansas a couple weeks ago, and it's one of my favorite pieces of music by anybody. The fact that I came from Kansas, I'm kind of
Yeah,
and they're kind of my hometown guys, and they were early inspiration. So I was glad to see you dig into that because I think that's, a lot of people just assume that, they're just some kind of arena rock band like Journey or Foreigner, but really their compositional prowess was much greater. They border on classical more than those other groups ever did. And it was nice to have you kind of share that with your audience and show them that, there's more to them than Carry On Wayward Son, which is a great tune. I mean, there's a lot packed into that little song,
yeah.
modulations and all kinds of stuff. But, magnum opus, Song for America, that's the big stuff, and I was glad to see you shine a light on those.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed that one quite a bit, especially seeing them performing it there in Topeka with
At
the
Washburn.
hometown orchestra. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that
it's
was
pretty
great.
it's pretty cool.
So, how aware are your students of your YouTube fame?
Um, they are aware. I'm actually not actively still in the classroom. My university that I was teaching at, which is Westminster Choir College, uh, when the pandemic hit, it was a major, major blow, not only to the arts community, but especially to people who use their voice to make music, right? So I was around a whole bunch of singers and choristers. It's like, what the hell do we do now, right?
Right.
And so that school had already begun this sort of generational transformation. It's into something else, and a lot of the student population kind of dwindled over the last 4 or 5 years, and so I lost my gig there. So right during the pandemic, and
Oh.
so that's when I started doing this other stuff. But my students that I have had recently, the funniest reactions are like, "Yep, that's the person we remember. That just being himself and like kind of the court jester, but making like telling you maybe some interesting stuff along the way." But they were like, "We paid $35,000 a year for this, and you're giving it away for free on the internet. Like, what the hell, man?"
Right. So you didn't pay that to talk about Iron Maiden all day, though. So
That is true. That is also true.
by the way, I really love Iron Maiden. They were like my favorite band when I was a teenager. So that was
You
another one.
know, what I really like. So as a classical composer, the limiting thing for me is that their harmonic vocabulary is not very extensive. That being
They
said,
have their tropes. I'll put it that
they
way.
do, they do. I mean, the galloping, rhythm.
Mhm.
But what I've really learned to appreciate about Iron Maiden, they're not singing about sex, drug, and rock and roll. They're singing about real stuff,
History,
and
you know.
historical things, moral dilemmas, things that change people. They're exploring some really, really impressive uh, subject matter, and it's hidden, not hidden. It's in plain sight, but it's delivered through the lens of heavy metal. But they're talking about some really important societal, historical, events, and what we can learn about it. And I really admire their longevity. And there again, to come a little bit full circle, how do you have success? You keep showing up. They keep putting out new music, and they keep coming to work, and they put in the time, and people respond in kind.
Absolutely, and
Yeah.
I like the fact that they go for this historical angle. I think heavy metal stereotypically people and prog rock too. It's like, oh, it's all about elves and fairies and dragons and dungeons. It's like, have you run across a prog song yet that talked about any of that stuff? Uh,
No,
I didn't think so because it's just kind of
no.
a bad stereotype hoisted on it by people that really haven't bothered to investigate it, I think.
There's a lot of metaphor that is used, and sort of fantastical imagery, but I consider those like modern fables or morality plays.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, and there was a lot of people, I think, back in the day that were intimidated by the pull and of this music, and that it was creating people that were thinking for themselves and sort of learning to be creative, and really want to ask questions and learn. And sometimes that's not too welcome
Sure. I
in
can,
certain
there's always going
segments
to
of
be
society.
adversity to open minds, but
Sure.
but they say mind's like a parachute. It only works if it's open.
There you
So
go.
you got to do that. Well, I guess we should wrap it up here pretty quick. Is there anything you'd like to share with our audience before we call it?
Well, I've had a really good time. I appreciate the invite, and always have a fun time having these conversations. My channel, so where you can find me, it's R. Douglas Helvering. If you type in Doug Helvering in the Google machine, you'll get me. From my YouTube, I have links to. I have a Twitter, I have a Facebook, I have an Instagram. and my Patreon is up and running, and that's a subscription service.
Mhm.
But we keep it relatively inexpensive. The highest tier is just $5 a month, and we do some. If you're looking for, like, if you want to hear King Crimson, they block on YouTube.
Oh, I'm
I
sure.
did. Yeah, they're one of the notorious ones, and so I did a reaction to their entire first album, In the Court of the Crimson King.
Oh, nice.
And it lives on my Vimeo, which is accessed through my Patreon. So we did, the entire Metropolis saga by Dream Theater.
Sure. Yeah, great.
That was an hour and 40 something long minute take, a continuous take. That was long.
Yeah,
but yeah, I'm available there. I try to answer as many folks that write to me as I can, and yeah, we're just happy for all of the folks that are joining in the community. It's a really supportive community of folks that we have that kind of come to class 5 days a week, and the entire thing that we're about is trying to be humble and look into some really great music and see what we can learn from it and how we can appreciate it better. So
your
it's a lot
reactions
of fun.
overall are positive. Do you ever feel like you need to be nice about this stuff?
Normally the people that are suggesting stuff for me are suggesting stuff that are their favorites, and they end up being quite lovely tunes. Even stuff that's harder edged, which I'm not as comfortable with. But I have spoken in a way that says that wasn't my favorite. Most notably, I pissed off some Megadeth fans.
Oh,
But there's some of them I call them like I see them. There was another one a couple weeks ago that I wasn't really a big fan of. I try to not exercise judgment about the musicians themselves. It's just, oh, this is a piece of art. I really liked it, or I somewhat didn't. But here's what was in it, and if I try to tell them I didn't like something, I'll try to quantify what in the piece I didn't like, or what I thought could have been done differently to help me like it more. Art is personal, and everybody likes their own stuff. I'm no different than that. But most of the stuff that I've done, I really have enjoyed.
Yeah, you can tell. You can tell. And,
yeah.
And I love that genuine quality about your delivery. So that's very cool. Can I suggest a couple things that I hope maybe you could put on the show sometime?
What do you got?
Well, I would love to see you do a little bit of this fusion stuff. Anything.
Oh, the fusion.
Yeah, I think anything from the Mahavishnu Orchestra, written by John McLaughlin, their guitar player. He has a really unique approach to arranging and harmony that I think you would find interesting.
Awesome.
Chick Corea and his Return to Forever group. Brilliant keyboardist, just top shelf.
I know of him.
Yeah, I would definitely check out some of his stuff. Some of the early stuff was like acoustic with piano, and later he got into synthesizers like everybody did in the mid 70s.
Sure.
So there's some great stuff. Like something from his Light as a Feather album. There's a tune called 500 Miles High that's a wonderful little epic that's all piano and
cool.
Really tasty stuff. And Steely Dan. I know this might seem like an odd choice, but they harmonically are pretty uptown, and they have kind of a little mini epic called Aja, AJA. That it's about 8 minutes long, and it's probably the most intricate Steely Dan tune. And I think you get a kick out of it.
I know Steely Dan. One of my good friends growing like in college was a big Steely Dan fan. I'll get to their stuff. That's a good choice.
I think people would get a kick out of that. Yeah.
That also reminds me of like Bella Fleck. We haven't done any of Bella's
great
music.
Stuff. Amazing. Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful like stuff. Victor Wooten, some of his stuff. So there's really lots of. That's the one thing, we're not running out of repertoire.
Oh no, and people are reminding you of things every day, I'm sure. So it's
it's somewhat disheartening when I have like a general sort of pencil in for a schedule for like the next month, and people are going this band, and their bands aren't anywhere on it. I'm like, yeah,
Just stick with me. You'll get to them
Yeah,
eventually, right? Did you do Supper's
yeah,
Ready from Genesis yet?
yes,
Okay, I was gonna say that's a must. I mean,
that is on the
yeah.
channel.
I'd love to see you do something from Yes's Tales from Topographic Oceans, the double
You
album with
know,
4 20-minute epics on it.
I almost had to do that when. So the way that we do that on our Patreon for our extended play series, I put up 5 bands, and whichever of the band wins, then I select 5 options for an extended play.
Okay.
So yes won the last poll, and it was really neck and neck between Fragile and Tales from
Oh
Topographic
wow.
Oceans.
Wow.
And I was much more pleased that I could work with a 42-minute album versus like an hour and a half of music,
Yeah, that's a
uh,
lot. Even the fans
which
usually don't listen to it in one sitting.
yeah, which I had done. The one previous to that, it was almost too much in one sitting. I did the entire The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, all
Oh
four
wow.
sides in one
Yeah,
sitting,
that's a lot.
and
Again.
I had to lick my wounds for a while. That was that one kind of churned me around, and
Yeah.
but I mean it's classic
Yeah.
Genesis.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's kind of
Great
a
stuff.
must. I'm glad you looked at it, but Fragile's a good pick. If there's one Yes album I'd give to somebody to get them started, I'd give them that one because it just
It was
kind
a
of,
wonderful album.
yeah. I mean, it has like 3 10-minute pieces and all those little solo pieces, and yeah, it's just got everything that I love about Yes.
Mm.
Kind of rolled
That
up into
last
one.
tune, Heart of the Ocean, is that what it was
Part of the
called?
Sunrise.
Heart of the Sunrise.
Yes.
Uh, wow.
Yeah, one of
Really, really
they have a lot of little
enjoyed it.
10-minute epics, and I'd say that's one of the greatest ones, easily, easily. Uh,
It's just a sonic, you know, just dessert at
uh,
the end of that album.
have you approached any Dixie Dregs yet? That is the guitar player that played with Kansas in the 80s when the other guitar player left and started a new band, Steve Morse. And they have a tune called The Odyssey that I think would be worth checking out. It's about 8 minutes long and it jumps
Cool.
through as many hoops as Song for America did. And I always
Okay.
felt like Kansas and Dregs kind of had a little bit of a kinship musically and
Okay.
otherwise. So I think if you like the Kansas stuff, you get a kick out of the Dixie Dregs. So,
Awesome. I haven't done
yeah.
any of their music yet, so great stuff.
I think your viewers would really get a kick out of it too, because again, they're kind of in that prog meets fusion land that a lot of people don't visit, but they should because it's really really cool stuff.
Yeah. The coolest thing is that we're getting classical Prog fans or classic Prog fans to talk with and have kinship with these newer Prog fans over on my Discord, and everybody's getting along.
That's good.
So
Well, Prague isn't always a happy, nicey world. There definitely have been factions of fans over the years. So the fact that you're bridging the gap and bringing them all together without them, yammering at each other, my stuff's cooler. It's like that's great. And there's so many younger bands that have come along in the last 20 years or even 30 years that get, everybody talks about the biggies, what I call the big five, Genesis, yes, King Crimson, um, ELP, and Gentle Giant. That's my big five.
sure.
The fifth is always kind of interchangeable. Other people would say Jethro Tull or Pink Floyd,
Mm,
but but anyway, these younger bands like Opeth, and not that they're that young. I mean, they've been around for 20 years now, but
right.
that kind of stuff, or Big Train. That's another example. I like that you're shining the light on some of these newer groups that are doing great stuff, but maybe people aren't aware of them. So thank
Yeah,
you.
and on my Friday episode coming up this week, we're doing Crystallized by Haken.
Oh, nice. Yeah,
And
those guys are really clever. Really clever.
yeah, I mean, I've done some Marillion lately. We've done the Flower Kings. So all of these were bands that I had no clue existed, 6 months ago.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just been a wonderful, wonderful, sort of ride through music that I'm like, this, I'm glad I get to listen to this. This is
Yeah.
great stuff.
Have you done Spock's Beard yet?
Yeah, we've done
Okay,
a few
because
of
they
their
hang
things.
big time right there in that 90s stuff. There's another one I suggested you probably haven't gotten to. They're called Echolyn, Echolyn. Highly suggest. They are my favorite 90s prog band, and they do some wonderful stuff. I'd say check out a tune called The Cheese Stands Alone. That's a pretty good one. I think you get a kick
Well,
out of.
I can tell you this: I have had a couple of people on my Patreon talking to me about Echolin, and they're like, they're never going to win a poll, but so you have to do their stuff, right?
Right.
And so I made a promise. I'm going to do their entire. Is it called May?
Ooh, wow.
MEI?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd start with that one, Doug. I'd start with their big album from the 90s called As the World, personally. Because May
As
is
the
just this
world.
hour-long piece of music, and it's wonderful, but I would never give that to someone to start with.
Yeah,
Just me personally. But
it's the hardest thing because when I was talking to the big train folks on Facebook about, okay, which I'm going to do their song, which one should I do first? They're like, this one, it's 24 minutes long,
right,
or how about this one? That's 18 minutes long. I
right.
said, is there anything shorter? And so we did London Plain today, which was right around 10,
Okay.
and it worked out really well. I enjoyed it. But yeah, I've had people talking to me about Echolin. So you say As the World would be a good
I
one
think
too.
that's
So
that's like their most popular album. That was their big
okay,
label breakthrough in the 90s that didn't really break through, but they were hopeful. And
there you go.
yeah, and they have a lot of Gentle Giant influence, and I think that's you don't find that in a lot of their peers. I think a lot of their peers were aiming more for Genesis, and
Mm,
yes, but Echoland was more about Gentle Giant and things in that ballpark. So it's
cool.
a little more a little more advanced when it comes to arranging and stuff, I think. So love it.
For sure.
Well, Doug, thank you so much for taking the time to give us a little background on your own music and your career. And we're really enjoying the show and excited to see what you do next.
All right. Well, thank you. It's been fun being here and appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Doug. I appreciate it. And if you could maybe point toward people towards this so they could check it out during your weekly kind of rundown of what you're doing next week, I'd be very grateful because I think a lot of people would really get a kick out of hearing your background.
Awesome. Sounds good. I will definitely let people know about it.
I would be grateful. Well, thank you, Doug. I appreciate it. All right, y'all. Well, take care. I will be back. I don't have anything on the docket right now, but I've got some big names kind of waiting in the wings. I'm just waiting to get an okay from them. So I'll be in touch. All
Sounds
right,
good.
Doug. Well, take care and tune into Doug's show 5 days a week, right?
Sounds good.
That's a lot
That's
of
us.
Doug to enjoy. All right. Well,
Trust me, there's enough to go around.
all right. Well, take care and give my best to your wife. Y'all
Thank you.
take care.
Appreciate it.
All righty. We'll see
Be
you.
good. Bye.